Here we go. From here. Okay, so we learned yesterday that if someone the guardrail broke in between the two lanes, the collector lanes and the express lanes. So because of that, there's an interchange of the fluids from each of the tubes. Someone wanted to say that won't be a problem, and Rav Papa didn't like it. Rav Bibi Bar Abaye wanted to say that it's not a problem. Now Abaye was a Kohen. He was from Mishpachas Eli Kohen, and the children of Eli Kohen didn't behave properly. They were cursed that they're not gonna live long and their children are gonna die young. So when Rav Bibi Bar Abaye said that this condition is kosher, Rav Papi said, someone who comes from Mimuloi, someone who comes from a background of children that aren't going to survive, Amr Mila Melissa will say foolish things that aren't true. And therefore he says, if the semen goes in its lane, in the express lane, and it doesn't get diverted into the collector lanes because of construction or anything, then it will be effective. But if it gets diverted, then it won't be effective. So Rav Papa is arguing, and he's saying, in fact, that this would be a problem. We're going to see today the Maskana of the Gemara is that it's not a problem. But here, Rav Papa is saying it is a problem. Tosfos says a different shot. It's like you could say, since you're from Michigan, you say I'm a Michigan Pshat. That's how Tosfos learns. Malloy was merely a city. You're from a Malloy, so you say I'm a Mila Melissa. That's literally like saying, since you're from Michigan, you say I'm a Michigan Pshat. Okay, so that is that shtickle. That's what we were just saying. But that's Rashi's first shot from the Bnei Eli. And Tosfos says that could be it's just the name of a place. Okay, Gavaltic. So now we're up to the second line from the top of Daf Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. We're going to learn today's fascinating things. We're going to learn surgical procedures from the Gemara's times. They wouldn't probably meet the standards in Sunnybrook Hospital, but fascinating nonetheless. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Nikav v'nistam. What if there was a hole in the gid? We know nikev is one of the things that will passel the yichus. V'nistam, and it got sealed up. It got sealed up. They used leak stop on it, so we understand they use leak stop on it. Kol she'ilu nikri v'nikra. They have to be able to test how much pressure the patch can hold. So they have to see. So the Gemara concludes here that the highest psi that the gid's ever going to hold is the pressure during ejaculation. Ejaculation was the name of the leader of the NDP party once upon a time in Canada. Ejaculating, right? So that's a whole different story. I don't think he's mentioned in the Gemara, but that's when there's the most pressure there. So you have to test the gid under the maximum pressure that it normally is designed to handle, and make sure that it doesn't rupture. So kol shilu nikre, the nikra, if when someone ejaculates, that's what nikri means. The pressure will pop the seal, the patch. Possible that makes impossible. The lav, and if not kosher, that means it's a sound repair, and he will not be considered a krusha. So how about
They didn't have non-destructive testing.
They didn't have non-destructive testing. Well, that's right. That's right. The test would have plotted it, correct. I'll have you know that there's a condition that I discussed several times called hypospadias. That's when the canal that holds the urine and the ejaculate does not go all the way to the end. So the urine shoots out from the side. It's a side shooter, right? So they repair that. They repair that by using the foreskin. I remember I discussed earlier that they can't do a bris on such a child because they need that foreskin. So they usually do the bris in the hospital so that the surgery is done on the spot after the foreskin is removed, because they need that to build the canal with. And very often, even after they do surgery, it develops a leak. Exactly this. It develops a leak. It's called, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's spelled Fistula, a fistula or a fistula. That's called when it leaks. and they actually do a pressure test. Imamish do a pressure test. They have some type of device that actually measures the pressure. So the Gemara is light years ahead of modern medicine. Zok the Gemara, calls you a nikra puzzle. V'lav, but if not, then kosher because it's a sound repair. Havaba Rava. So Rava wanted to know, where is this hole that we're referring to occur? Now remember, we said that the bottom is the end of the gid, because we look at the gid when it's not horizontal, we look at it when it's vertical, so where it connects to your body is the top, and the tip is the bottom. So if we're talking about on the Torah, well, there's no problem with any type of hole. Even if that was cut off, we said, as long as there's one little strip remaining. So the hole that we're discussing that needs repair is obviously not in the Torah. Rather, it's on the Torah Atzma. And the way I understood this is that it's right at the line in between the Torah and the gid itself. So if it ruptures, it's going to blast a little bit of a hole that's going to infringe slightly on the gid itself. A mashu of a hole on the gid itself is going to be a problem. So it's like it's right on the edge, but on the Torah side of the edge. But a hole that blasts can spread into the gid, which is critical. I see Shlomi's looking at the article. I wouldn't mind if you can confirm that.
Normally, you would just say it would be Lamaila. That would be the opposite, right? In the normal language, not God. He says no, it has to be talking about right at the edge.
So you want to know why isn't it in the middle? Why isn't it tucked in the middle?
It is. It's right at the edge.
You want it at the edge. Why could it be anywhere in the Torah? So what he says is right. This is what the Mepharshim my Masber is. The pressure builds right at the tip. So they can't do this test only at the tip because that's anything lower than that. There's no pressure there anyway. The highest pressure is right at the tip. Right. 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 And this is Rashi. If you look at the third skinny line in Rashi, Rashi says that. You can't say it's in the actual gid part. The hasam vadi loy mikra. There for sure won't tear. The pressure is highest where it goes out. I'm not sure how that works scientifically, but that's what Rashi says. So Itmar Zok Gemara. Itmar Nami. Amar Rav Mori Bar Mar Amar Mar Ukva Amar Shmuel. Nika Batar Atzma. Again, we're talking about that line. Vinistam, and then it got plugged. Kol Shilu Nikri. Vinikra. If when there's an ejaculation, it bursts the hole, can it not withstand the pressure? Possible. Then lav kosher. If not, it'll be kosher. So now we need to know how in the world do you do this test? Like Avigdor says, we don't have non-destructive testing. So Shalachle Rava Barei de Rava Rabbi Yosef. Ilamdeni Rabbeinu. Oh, you came for the most fun part. Ilamdeni Rabbeinu. Teach us, Rebbe, Heichi Avdina. How do you create an ejaculation? How do you stimulate that in such a way that it's mutter? So it's Ogaret, you can't do it by hand because that is loisinov. Neopiyat is called loisinov. That's an aver. So we need to figure out how we're going to do this hands-free. Amarle, so this is what you do. Maisinan nahama chamima desari. You take a hot, straight out of the oven, a hot bread, barley bread. Umanchinan, this is like a prostate massage. Umanchinan le ave pukri. You put it by the Piat Abbas. There are those who learn it means right there. There are those who learn it's a sensitive area between the Piat Abbas and the Beitzim. There are those who say it's right on the hole. That the issue is. But whatever it is, that creates a tremendous stimulation, umikri, and that causes someone to ejaculate. Do not try this at home. And if you do, don't put the bread back in the cabinet. Beta.
Or tell you that we tried it.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever this bread is not reusable. It doesn't discuss what you do with the bread, but you put the bread away, you burn it with the chametz. Okay. So Zok the Gemara weiter, v'chazinalei, and then you could see if the gid was able to withstand the pressure.
Why is that?
Oh, we're going to get to that because why it might not be near, but why is it tatzara zera levatola? That is the question on the sugya, and I'm going to get to it, and that leads into a whole different question of when you're testing somebody for fertility, how are they able to be moitzi zera? Why isn't it tatzara zera levatola? So that's going to be the question we're going to discuss after I finish the Gemara. But it gets more exciting, the Gemara. Amar Abaye, You thought this was the uncomfortable part. Now it's going to get even better. Amar Abaye, Atu Chula Alma Yaakov Avinu Havai. Is everybody so holy that he's so controlled and protected from being Moitzi Zera that it takes this high level stimulation to create Zera? What was the high level Kedusha of Yaakov Avinu? Koichi Bereishis Oini, referring to Reuven, his first son. It was the first time he had Zera. Shaloirah Keri Miyama. So not everybody's like that. Most people can be stimulated much, much more easily than Yaakov Avinu. Ella Amar Abaye. Abaye said, let's use a much simpler stimulant that doesn't involve a maisa. And it doesn't discuss specifically if he puts the bread there or if somebody else is putting it there, because that's what we were discussing. There's actually a shaila about it. So whatever the case is, what you do is something else. Mavrinin kamei big tzavonim. You put begodim that are attractive type of stimulating begodim of a woman. You put begodim of a woman, stimulating woman, like a Victoria's Secrets catalog, right? You put that there. You walk him through Yorkdale. Right? I remember once I saw a vision that will never leave my mind. In Yorkdale, I don't go through Yorkdale anymore. I hate Yorkdale. But I was once in Yorkdale, maybe it was 10 years ago, maybe more. And there was a huge Victoria's Secret sign that was completely not sneezing, not appropriate. I know a lot of Jewish women actually complained to management that it's inappropriate to have such a picture in the mall. And I remember Reb Seufer went with his wife to Yorkdale, and he was standing right under the picture, totally oblivious, with a big, massive Shas Gemara. It was such a geschmack. He was a big, massive Gemara standing, not even realizing where he was standing. It was Gavaldi. I find it that every time my wife goes to Yorkdale, she gets mugged. She gets mugged because she leaves $100 there and she comes back with $25 worth of merchandise. So she gets mugged regardless, even if there's no gun. So let's see what the Gemara says weiter. So the Gemara says, what you do is you could put in front of them big dates of onion, and that will get their mind going to create a Haitzah Zera. Now, it's very important to note. It says in Rashi, Tzavon Shal Isha, not of a specific Isha. It's not of a woman who he recognized the clothing, because that would be an Isser thinking about a woman. That would be wrong. So it was just begodim, so he wouldn't be thinking of any specific woman. Umar Be'isha, not on a specific woman, generally on a woman, the nikrin that will cause him to have carried. So Amar Rava, Atu Kula Amar Brazila Galadi, is everybody, I have to use the word because this is the word that touches. I'm not trying to be inappropriate. Is everybody so horny like Barzilai Hagalodi that just having such a vision will be such a trigger? Better treat everybody like Yaakov than treat everybody like Barzilai. And Rashi says Barzilai was shotuf bezima hayil. He was a shotuf bezima. There's no better way to describe it. The Chsiv Bey, it says in Mitam Abdecha, he was so shotuf bezima that caused his senses to become dull. And at the end of his life, he was unable to taste. He lost the sense of taste, and that was a byproduct of his constant involvement in znus. Since he was shotuf bezima, he aged, and he lost the sense of taste before a typical person would lose it because of what he was doing. And how do you know that the sense of taste should last a very long time? There was a maidservant who worked in Rebbe's house who was 92 years old, and she was the official tester of the food. So she must have had a very keen sense of taste if that was her responsibility. Yet Barzilai, who was much younger, had a dull sense of taste. So it came from the fact that he was shot at Bazima. Physically inside? I don't know. The Rambam also says someone who's boiled a lot, they get the ages, he has more hair. I don't know exactly how it works, but that's like it. So let's see about Yaakov Avinu. Shaloirah carry miyama. Well, if it's loirah carry miyama, that means from the first bia that he made, the first time Zerah came out of him, that was the conception of Reuven. But the problem is, Leah was the basula, it was her first bia, and we know Ein Isha Misaberes Mi Birishai. So there must have been a bia before where his Zerah was not producing Reuben. Zok Toisus is a very small Toisus. So let's see what Tosfos says. Shloirah carry me yamav with this abra mi bia rishayna. Why was Leah this having been bia rishayna? She miyachabetz. She broke her basulim before she was with Yaakov Avinu, so that there'll be a higher chance that she will become misaberes. So I guess Leah wanted to harness the koyach of Yaakov. Maybe he even told her about himself that he was never moitzi zera. So she wanted to make sure that she would conceive from that. So she broke her basulim. There's actually a lot of Torah about that. Yes, please.
The fact that a man was Moitzi Zera, not Moitzi Zera, doesn't seem to be what is the reason why a woman can't get pregnant from a first bia. It has to do with her body, not how many times he was Moitzi Zera.
That's correct. But the fact of the matter is, let's say he was never Moitzi Zera, and the first time he had bia with Leah, she didn't get pregnant. So then Reuben's not Reish Shani. Reuben's the second shot. In order for Reuben to be the first shot, that means she had to become pregnant with the first bia because she didn't have bia with anybody else first, right? The first bia she ever had was from Yaakov Avinu, and from that bia she got pregnant.
I mean, do we translate it literal, Reish Shani? That's actually the first one. I mean, this is like, early days.
There's Rishonim who actually explain it like you, because there's a lot of Torah that I want to speak out of here in a second. But before I do, I think that Moshe said something. Is the connection better or is it still choppy?
For me, it's bad. It could just I don't know if anyone else.
Fine for me.
I'm going to ask everybody else. Is it breaking up? Because Moshe said every so often there's a gap.
Not for me.
No, it's clear like a shofar blower.
It's good for me. Good for me.
Okay, Shkoich. Rav Moshe, I don't want to put you under any type of pressure, but it seems like the internet on your end, it means there's probably a high level of kedusha in your house that doesn't let the internet tumah invade your house.
Oh, I hope that's the case.
So another thing the Rishonim ask is, all of these siblings, all of the Shvatim were born with a sister. It's brought down in certain midrashim, which means Reuben was born with a daughter, with a sister. But Reuben came out first. Reuben was the Behor. Reuben came out first. We learned in the Rashi by Yaakov and Esav that Esav came out first. It's a raya that Yaakov was the first tipa. It's like two tipas, like two marbles in a test tube, right? It's FIFO. No, it's not FIFO. It's Philo or LIFO. Last in, first out. Exactly. So kum techais. If Reuben came out first, he wasn't the tipa Rishona. The tipa Rishona must have been the sister, right? So that's also a question that they ask. So that's why a lot of the Mefarshim say what Dubi said is that it means it was Reishis Einoi. It means there was a Reishis, there was no Levatola. Even if there was a Bia first, the breaker Basulam, that counts too. That's also pretty good. Not everybody can claim such a level of Kedusha like Yaakov Avinu. Okay. So Zok to Gemara. So we finished this Gemara. So now comes the Shiloh as follows. Why isn't there not a problem of Haitzara Zera Levatal? So there's a couple of things to discuss. The first thing to discuss is the day that we learned that everybody was riveted to the computer listening to every word was when we learned that Tosfos and Amar Beis that was talking about Bia Shaloi Kedarka. And one of the issues that Tosfos brings up in that Tosfos of Bia Shaloi Kedarka is that's going to be like Zera Levatala, because there can't be any type of pregnancy from a Bia Shaloi Kedarka. So Tosfos says there, once in a while it's allowed. That's what Tosfos says. Once in a while it's allowed. So Tosfos is saying that don't try this at home. Once in a while, Mishkafer. So therefore here they're doing it for testing. So it could be using that Savara of Tosfos, it won't be a problem. There are others who say, what's the reason why Haitzar Shalavatala is because you're supposed to be moiled? Well, you're doing this to be moiled. So how could this be considered Haitzar Shalavatala if the whole purpose of this activity is that he can be moiled? So therefore it wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, Reb Moshe, when it comes to in vitro, where they have to get the semen of the man, so kula alma moida, you can't be noifiyah. That's very awesome. The way they do it, someone once told me, he went through it, they send him with a cup into a room with a magazine and they tell you to deliver. But a yid's not allowed to do that. Reb Moshe says that the way it's supposed to be done is you have to have relations, the person that has relations with their wife, and they use a condom. And then the condom captures the zera, and that's how they're able to submit it. But Reb Moshe says that even that's not appropriate, that a couple should go in the lab and do it. It's not sneezistic. they should have in the privacy of their home. They should, if they could, they should do it that way. Then bring it. In most cases, the lab won't work with that because they need to have control and they need to get things delivered on time before things spoil. So, but Rav Moshe L'chila, that's the way it should be done. We shouldn't have to know from these things, but that's what Rav Moshe says, and it's not a Tzarech Shalav at all, because of course the whole thing is being done to help be mighty. Okay, so that's the goal.
Yes, sir?
You invited in that.
What?
They have to make a little hole in the condom.
Oh, that's right. That guy told me that. That's right. You have to make a hole in the condom too. He did tell me that. You have to make a hole in the condom as well. That's correct. I remember.
Yes,
that. Yes.
There are two issues why this should be a problem. One is al shechazera and one is al layinaf. So why is it that we use the heter that we want to try to help this person as a way of getting rid of shechazera, but for some reason it's not a good enough heter for layinaf.
Because loisinaf means you're not allowed to do niyuf, but this is niyuf. But you're allowed to be moitzeh zera without niyuf. There's two different things. Niyuf doesn't mean being moitzeh zera. Niyuf means doing znus. So why would we be mata doing znus if you can get the zera without doing znus?
I mean, this isn't really znus; it's a derabanan, I'm sure.
Well, loisinaf, there are those who learn that loisinaf is a deraisa isser of niyuf biyad. They don't teach this in cheder or in litfish yeshivas. You have to look into alternative svarim to learn about these things. I have a kuntrus that I actually printed in Business Depot that I sent to me online. I'm actually looking through it now. It's called, not what it's called, but it was written by a guy anonymously. I assume he didn't want to put his name on it, but he wrote it under the guidance of Steinman, Rabbi Yashiv, Rabbi Chaim Kanevsky, and they pushed him to write it because even though the Litvish Welt and Mahalach is not to discuss these things, but in today's day and age where we're so bombarded with nisyonis, the Gedolim felt that he should address these things more directly. And I read actually his Akdama, that's what he writes in his Akdama, but he does read anonymous. I forgot what it's called. It's a kuntrus. I'll tell you how many pages it has. It costed me $32 to print. So how many pages is that at Business Depot? I bound it also. So if you put the pages upside down, then when they bind it, it actually comes up the right way. If you actually you upload the file upside down. So then when they bind it, because normally they bind it the English way. Yeah. My son taught me that, but I forgot what it's called. But it's a beautiful kuntrus. So so it is considered allowed. I believe he quoted the Ramah. The Ramah said that it's an Isser Deraisa, and I think he quotes Lois enough. I'll have to look it over again, but it's a serious issue. Zok the Gemara, Tanu Rabban. Nikav pasol mishum shu shoises. What is the problem with a gid that has a hole in it? Shoises. So let's see what Rashi says. Shemechamimus hatayva yoytze derech haneket. When he's getting aroused, the zera is going to ooze out of the hole on the side, and it won't shoot out the front. Ein yoyer kachetz. It's not going to shoot out the front. The kaimal on shich v'zera she'in yoyer kachetz ein amazriya. If the shich v'zera doesn't shoot out like an arrow, it's not mazriya. So that's the problem with a hole at the side. But nistam, if it got plugged, then kosher, it's going to be kosher mipnei shu moilid. So kum tachos, if you have a problem that could be repaired, it's called b'zo psul shechosher lechsheroi. This condition, this hole is a psul that can be repaired. By the Bride saying after this, there must be some other hole in halacha that cannot be repaired. Zel lemutei mai. What type of hole cannot be repaired? Lemutei krum she'ola machmas maka bereya. If an animal had a hole in his lung, and then its internal, naturally occurring nefloyas haboye leak stop that oozes out of the lung and then plugs the hole to allow it to heal, that would not heal the animal, the einay krum. And Rashi tells us this is something that we're quite familiar with. Rashi says the einay krum mishum the hadar miftach. It's something that's going to eventually open up. So Rashi, behainu hanach sirchi dereya. These are the sircha. We know sirchas on a reya, sirchas that are found on lungs, lesions that are found on lungs make the animal crave. The mitru b'chayusa. Now the halacha is sirchas are common, so because of that they're actually checked on every animal. They have a big balloon inflator in the shlachtois, and they take the lungs of the animal. They actually inflate them. So they're big and they can actually see its entire surface area. And even in crevices, they stick their hands to feel for little growths that are on the lung. Now, if there's any growth at all, that's assuming that the lung was once injured, and according to Sfardim, it's no longer glad kosher. So they don't eat those. We allow, I think, up to 3 sirchas. If you could take them off and underneath them it's already healed, then we still consider it glad. I think it's up to 3 sirchas. Some of the shoichet, I'm sorry? Up to 3 sirchas, I think we allow. So Svardish meat is actually more expensive, heter b'shoisef, hechsher b'shoisef, because any lesion, they throw it out. They send it to the Ashkenazi traffic department. They send it to the Ashkenazi traffic department, right?
Yes,
That's and we're the ones, and even so, even though they send it to us, they still say slichas halal. And what affairs do they do? I know why.
Yes.
It's because they take showers during the 9 days. I'm sorry, what's that?
Is the reason is that because of the sirchas they were a treifa?
Yeah, the sircha makes it a trait. Now, if technically, if you could peel off the sircha and the lung is still intact, so the animal was kosher, but we don't consider it glad kosher if it has too many sirchas. Glad kosher means, I think, a maximum of 3 sirchas. Don't quote me on it. You have to ask a shoichet or a boidik. But I know the Sfardim are very makbid, and they won't eat it with any sirchas at all.
And what Ernie Mann said about that.
Mhm.
The road was cruising once, and it's no difference between blood kosher and not blood kosher. So Ernie Mann says, yes, $5 a pound.
That's right.
In those days, it was $5.
So Zok Gemara, so a lung, a hole in the lung, we don't consider properly sealed with a sircha. But a hole in a gid, they do. So the question is, what is the surgical procedure if you go to Sunnybrook Hospital and you want to get this hole patched? What is the surgical procedure? So now we're going to have a fascinating spotlight into the surgical procedures of the Gemara's times. Your aunt would have been very proud of this procedure. Why aunt? This point aunt we're going to see. What do you do? So the first thing you got to do is you got to rough up the edges of the hole so that a patch will stick to it. So how do you do that? Mycin and sa'arta. If you had any leftover barley when you made that bread that you used earlier in the Gemara, you happen to have some extra barley, take some of that barley. Barley is a little bit coarse. It's somewhat abrasive. You rub it around the edges of this hole to make it bleed, to make it raw. So now a patch will stick to it. Umaisin and tarba. Then you bring schmaltz. So most of these ingredients you can get from a typical kiddush and dagura. You take some barley out of the cholent. First you take the bilka and you rub it over there in the back, right? And then if the hole busts, so then you take some barley from the cholent, the dagura, and you give it a schmear around over there where it busts, right? And then you take some schmaltz from the herring. Tarba, you take some feta schmaltz from the herring, or if you wait a little bit after the kiddush, you can take the hardened fat from the cholent pan, v'shayfinon, and mishmir t'stot narim zayagit, and then umaysinan shumshana gamla, they get a big ant, not your father's sister or your mother's sister. I mean the insect. You take a big ant, and actually I told you your aunt would love it. Your aunt would not like this at all, because look at the process. You take the ant, and you let it dig its way into the hole. So now its head is stuck in the hole, and as soon as its head is stuck in the hole, you cut his head off. What a beautiful patch. What a beautiful plug. Could you imagine? That's sick ratio. Yeah. Could you imagine if you could do that to plug your tires? It would be machaya. I would take some barley from the cholent and put it on the nail, and then put a little shmirach of the herring on my tire, right? It would be great for snow tires, especially if they're lubricated with schmaltz. That'll really stop you easily. And then you take an ant and you put it there in the hole, and bang.
I can understand the small, I can theorize, but what's with the head of the ant?
It's the perfect size plug. And it goes in by itself. You know, if you don't have a tool to get it, how are you going to get it in? The ant will dig his way in. You actually use the ant, he digs his way in, and then you cut it off. It's a self-applying plug. Think about that. If you have a self-applying plug, what more could you ask for? That's happens to be goinus of the maram to figure that out. It's literally a self-applying plug.
It's called tire in a can.
I'm sorry, Akiva?
It's called tire in a can. You know those things you blow up? What do you think it's made out of?
Well, this is
No.
where you can't. It's in the front.
The note here from Rashi, Yossi, the note here from Rashi says it's the perfect size to plug up the hole, and as it disintegrates, there is corrective tissue that grows. So that's why I use
Right,
it.
right. Okay, I'll read the Rashi side. Rashi says over here, Shumshna Gamal Nama, a big land, a big ant, Umenachtin Lay Manichin Rosh Hasham, Venoishich, Venivik Rosh Beneka, it digs its way in, of skin like the Rasha, Liostuma, so it should plug up, the Chosman, Shahoilachubola, as the head deteriorates, Habasar Oilam Schaber. So as the head deteriorates because it's dead, the hole will be filled by the growth. And you've stimulated growth by scraping it with the barley from the children.
So the ant lost
Wait
his
a
head
minute,
over.
do you tell the woman that that's what you have over there before you?
I don't know, but I think there's a chesura mechsur in the Gemara. I think after you do this, you bandage it up with the wrapper of the kishka. Because how else would you do it? Like Akiva told me yesterday, someone who eats kishka on Shabbos either has a very good stomach or a very bad memory.
Yossi,
Yes.
he went in over his head, the ant.
Yeah, get gezoekt. Vidavka Sairasa. But listen, he went overboard, but you gave him a tip. Vidavka Sairasa. You should only use as the abrasive device a piece of barley. Aval Parzala, don't use like a file, like a carpenter's file, because Mizrav Zorif and Rashi has two pshatim. Either it means it'll chew up the tissue too much, it'll cause a problem, or it means it'll cause inflammation. Either way, it won't induce healing. Now, this hole that you can plug, only a small hole you can plug this way. Aval Gadol, if it's a large hole, then mikvule mikvul, the patch will eventually peel off because there's no hope for such a hole. Amar Rabba Barahuna, Hamatul Mayim Mishtei Mekayimos. Once this is speaking where you have your superhighway for the zera, you have your superhighway for the urine, and the guardrail breaks in between. There's construction, and they're now diverting traffic through the other hole. Puzzle, since the zera is not staying in its proper chamber, it becomes impotent, and therefore it's puzzle. And Amar Rava said, less hilchasa loikibra. We don't pass him like the son. Who is the son? Rabba Barafuna. So even though up on top of the Amid, Rapabi called him Amamullah, who said Stusim, Lamaisa, here the Gemara is paskening less hilchasa kabra that Amat Lamai Mishtei Mekaymis will not be possible. Right? And Veloik Abba, we don't pass him like Rav Huna either. Barahad Amr, we've quoted Rabba Barahuna, but Abba, what did Rav Huna say that we're not passing like? The Amr of Huna, Noshem HaMesulala Zubazu. This is two women. I think the English term for it is scissoring. They rub their ervas on each other. It's a highly inappropriate type of activity. I'm not sure if it's one of the letters in the alphabet. I think it's L of the LGBTQ. I think it's, you know how the Gemara had different pankres and machbas. So now we're going to learn that different Rosh Davis. LBGQ, I think this is the L, right? So Nashim HaMesulala Zubazu, Psulais Lukahuna, they're Pasul Lukahuna. We don't pass like that. Such a woman is not Pasul Lukahuna. Even if you pass like Rabbi Lazar, which we know we don't pass like, but even if you would pass like Rabbi Lazar, that a panu abalapnu makes her into a zoina, hanami leish, abal isha, but a woman produces a balma. I don't think I need to explain the difference if it's an isha and an isha or an isha and isha. I think the difference is self-explanatory. So therefore, it doesn't make her into a zonia, it doesn't pass her. She's even allowed to marry a kohen if she does something like that. However, it's highly inappropriate. The poskim say you could even give a woman makas mardus for that. You're abundant to stop her from doing that because it's not an appropriate activity.
Some of these women like it when you give them the matzahs. It's part of their whole.
That could be. So that's the Gemara. Okay, so now we're going to get back to more. We're going to know a fascinating sugya, and as Shmuel Shver always says, the Lablina strikes again. We're going to learn about Rusa Moyavia and the problem with the shidduch. There was a little bit of a yichus problem in the shidduch when the Boaz sent out the invitation to his wedding. So we have we have the whole introduction, and we say Hakala Habasula Hamulala Im Bas Gilai Ein Beis Gimel. Right, the modern guys say Ein Beis Lamed. Right, Ein Beis Gimel and Hakala Habasula Hamulala Rus Hamoyavia. And then there was an asterisk. There was an asterisk on the invitation. At the bottom it said My ovi below my office. So just in case someone looks at the invitation and there's a palm, he looks at the asterisk in the bottom. He's I'm allowed to go, right? So Zok the Gemara. So Psuadaka u'Krushavka, Psuadaka u'Krushavka mutar b'Geyeris u'Meshachreres. Even though they can't come to Kal Hashem, they are allowed to marry a Geyeris and Meshachreres. Ve'ein asurun ela milovei b'Kal. Shenemer loyovei Psuadaka u'Krushavka b'Kal Hashem. But Geyeris Meshachreres are not called Kahal. Boy minei Rab Sheshes. So they asked Rab Sheshes, Psuadaka kohen, and we had this shaila already before. What if the kohen is a Psuadaka, who normally a kohen may not marry a Geyeris or a Meshachreres because they have the status of a Zoina? Would a kohen who's a Psuadaka be able to marry these women? Do you say B'Ktushas a kohen, he still retains his restrictions of who he can marry as a kohen, and therefore he's stuck, he can't marry these women, nor can he marry a Bas Yisrael, so he's stuck? Or maybe since it's Tzudaka, he no longer has the extra kedusha of kahuna, and now he's no longer restricted from marrying a zaina, Bishari, and therefore he would be able to marry such a woman. Amar says, can you do it? We have a Mishnah that clarifies your halacha. It says Tzudaka Yisrael Mutter ben Nesina. And Nesina is a woman who comes from the Shiva Amim, who we were told we're not allowed to accept them in as gerim, rather we have to kill them. So so Yisrael is not allowed to marry someone from the Shiva Amim. What happens if a Tzudaka, he can't marry a Bas Yisrael, can he marry a Nesina? The Mishnah says he could. Zok Gemara, if you hold that the Tzudaka remains on the same level of his kedusha before, and if there's a Yisrael, how could we allow him to marry a Nesina? You shouldn't marry into this nation. So Elamai, it must be that since he's a Tzudaka, he no longer has the restrictions of who he could marry, and he's allowed to marry this Nesina. So let's say as well, a kohen, once he becomes a Tzudaka, is no longer restricted by the marriages that only a kohen can have, and he can marry a Tzudaka as well. Omar Rabba, you don't have a raya from there. You think that's what it depends on? If he retains his kedusha Yisrael? Not at all. There it's a completely different cheshbon, and therefore you would be able to you can't bring any right to a kohen. Dilma moiled ben, but also the problem with marrying one of these goyim from the Shiva Amamin, Midairaisa, is because if you marry a shiksa, or if your daughter marries a goy, what are the children going to look like? They're probably not going to be the top yeshiva bachim. They're probably going to be badly influenced, and they're going to go after there.
What is a pseudaka? What is a pseudaka? Pseudaka is someone that can't have children.
Correct.
So what are they worried about over here? He's not going to have any children.
You could have literally written the Gemara. That's mamish beautiful. That's mamish beautiful. So let's see the Gemara. The deraisa is not marrying this person when they're good. That's a deraisa. So that there's no option to change. But kimegari, what if one of these nations become geir? You're not supposed to accept them. But you see that the Sinim were able to fool Moshe and Yeshua, and they got in. So then kimegari, be Yisrael sharu. Then midaraisa, they are allowed to marry Yisrael. Rabbanon to the Gozriba. Now it's only the Rabbanon. The Rabbanon are going to say, don't marry one of these people, even though they're Geirim, because we don't want you to marry them when they're not gay. And the Chi Gozru Rabbanon, who would the Rabbanon be worried about that they are going to have children that are going to go up to derech? Only those who are going to have children, like what Beryl said. The Lavbari Ludi, a Psuadako can't have children anyway. Like Gozru Rabbanon, they wouldn't be such a Xera. So the reason why the Yisrael can't marry in a sin, and in this case, if he's a Psudak, he could marry in a sin, it's speaking where she was Megayer, and the Rabbanan didn't restrict that, because anyway, there's no chashash of children. But by the Kohen, it's a Shail of Kedusha. So therefore, we don't have a raya that a Kohen who's a Psudaka could marry a Giyarus. Zakti Gemara, but if that's your logic, Elamayata Mamzer de Bar Ilude, Hachanami de Aser. So based on your logic, a Mamzer would not be allowed to marry in a sin, because a mamzer has to raise nice Jewish children, right? Just because you're a mamzer, it doesn't mean you don't raise nice Jewish children. I know a lot of mamzerim who have wonderful children, right? So you have to raise nice Jewish children. So logic would dictate that they wouldn't be able to marry a nesin, a gavoini, who was Megayer. But the Brisa says otherwise. Because the Tanya says, mamzerim unesinim, or I think it says alamat not mamzerim unesinim, mutar and lavi zebezeh. A mamzer is not a marry nisin. So you see, your logic can't be right. It can't be about going off the derech. Because why would a mamzer be allowed? So we have to reevaluate, and we have to say, he goes rabbanon b'ksherim b'psulim legozer rabbanon. The rabbanon were gozer that even if nisin became Jewish, even if the beginning became Jewish, we still don't allow you to marry them, but we're not going to apply the gzeira in unusual cases. A mamzer is a highly unusual situation. A psuadaka is a highly unusual situation. They didn't extend their gzeira to these unlikely cases. So that was the Gemara, so we don't have a right. Then Hadu Amarova, then Rabbi says, no, your whole answer is not our answer. We have a beautiful right. Lav milsi. Whatever we said until now, this far is nishkashtoigin, nishkafloigin, sefanktich nishtun, and lotzich nishtos. Why? Let's see the Gimel. Lav milsi, the Amri, begiyuson, les lahu, chasmas. How could the pasuk, the rise of the Keisser to marry the Gavoini, be referring to when they didn't become a Gerim yet? If they didn't become Gerim, it can't say like the Schatten Bom, because Kedushin isn't typus on the goy. So obviously, like the Schatten Bom is saying, in the case where Kedushin will be typus, that's when there's an Isser, which means when they were Megayer, the Isser was Schatten Bom. So the Deraisa is even when they were Megayer. Nisgaru is Luchastis. So if that's the case, you have to speaking when there's a Geyeris. If it's speaking when there's a Geyeris, so why is it that a Tzuadaka may marry these people? It must be because it's not Biktu Shasekai, and therefore the Deraisa doesn't apply to it anymore. If you're going to say it by a Tzuadaka Yisrael to marry a Gavani, well then a Tzuadaka V'Kohen, you'll also say the level of Kedusha goes down, and he's allowed to marry the Geyeris. Most of Rabbi Yosef, what are you talking about? You think that when it says Loises Chaten Bom, it means Tvisas Kedushin? I'm going to prove to you that Loises Chaten doesn't necessarily mean only when there's Tvisas Kedushin. Because it says, Vayischaten Shloime es Bas Pari Melech Mitzrayim. Shloime married a Shiksa, Bas Pari Melech Mitzrayim. So you see, you can use the word Loises even though it's not a marriage. So Vayter, we can go back to what we said before, maybe the Isra Deraisa of marrying a Gavani is only, she's a Goya. No, Giyure Gaira. Shloime first was Megayer, this Bas Pari Melech Mitzrayim, and then he married her. Frank Gemara, how could Shloime be Megayer Bas Pari? We learned earlier in the Masechta, like Kiblu Geirim, Loi B'mei David, Loi B'mei Shloime. When Klal Yisrael was flying high, we were at the top of the world. Every loser, schlepper guy wanted to connect to us, not because they wanted mitzvahs, it's because they wanted to have the beautiful life that we have. The beautiful Gashmistic life, not the Ruchnistic life. They didn't care so much about davening and Shul on Shabbos, but the Kiddush they wanted to come to, right? So therefore we can't accept Gerish because we don't know that they're sincere. If they want to join us when we're downtrodden, yeah, then they're sincere. So that's the whole reason why you don't accept Gerish. But Paspari wasn't some loser guy. She was at the top of the world. The only reason why you wouldn't accept Goyim is because they want to upgrade their physical, their Gashmistic lifestyle. So let's turn over onto the Amid Beis. She was living in the palace. She lived in the lap of luxury. She definitely didn't need to become Jewish for Gashmi. So if she did it, she was surely doing it L'Shem Shemayim. So a Giyaris like her, Avada Shloim HaMelech, was able to accept. Correct the Gemara. One rule for thee, one rule for me. I have a lot to say on this, but it's still 9:51. Zok the Gemara. I have another reason why Shloim HaMelech should not have been able to marry. He was over in the Deraisa. The Mitzvahs Rishonahi. It says Ador Shlishi, Dar Shlishi, you'll have the Bakal. So how is Shloim HaMelech allowed to marry a first generation Mitzvahs? What do you mean Mitzvah? The Mitzvah that the Torah asks is a real Egyptian, the ones who enslaved us. But they got killed. All of the Mitzrayim got killed in the Yamsuf. So the people who are living in Egypt today aren't the same nation who enslaved us. It's a totally different people. So that's how Shlomo was able to marry them. Zok to Gemara, you can't say that. I'm sorry? But even if all the men were killed, there's no one to, this is generations later, there was no one to continue the nation. So who knows who took over? If there's a whole bunch of women and no men there and all the soldiers are killed, who knows which nation overran? Could have been Iran who overran. They're very active in the area, right? Zok to Gemara, Vatanya, it's not true. I'll prove to you that the original Mitzrim were there in the time of the Gemara. So they were surely there in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, Because Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Min Yamin Ger Mitzrei Haya Lichaver Mitamidi Rabbi Kiva. One of the guys in my shir his name was Binyamin, and he was a Ger Mitzri. He was in the shir. He was a regular Talmud Chacham with the Hak to learn it. And he was a Lamdan. He was a smart guy, and he wanted to marry into Klal Yisrael, but he knew he couldn't. So what he said is, Ani Mitzri Rishon. I'm a Mitzri Rishon. Do you know who I married? V'nasasi Mitzri Rishona. I married a Mitzri from the first generation, because we're both not able to marry into Klal Yisrael. But my son, ich zie chazar chushe v'shidach hamazin. Ich will nicht stam nemen stam afro. Ich will not nemen a chushe v'fro. Asid levanai Mitzri shnia. I'm only going to want the top, someone who's at least a second generation Mitzri. Why? Kidei she'ben b'ni roi lovei b'kal. But therefore, if my son marries a mitzvah from the first generation, then weiter we're going to have to wait on the half of the wife. So therefore, I'm going to make sure to marry him. So you see, there were real mitzvah in these days. So we're back to square one. Amar Papa, Anan Mishloima Aleiku B'Nesev. We're asking now a kasha from Shloima Melech. What are you talking about? Shloima Leinosav Midin. Shloima didn't even marry her. This is not a marriage. So there was no issue of marrying a Mitzri. It was not a marriage. The Chsiv Bey, it says, referring to Shloima, it was morning Shloima Melech. This wasn't the greatest day of his life. It says, Asher Omer Hashem El B'nei Yisrael Loisavayu B'hem. The nation that HaKadosh Baruch said, you shouldn't marry into them, and they shouldn't marry into you. Why not? Because this nation that I said don't have to do with them, Shloima Melech fell in love with this woman, and she connected to him. It wasn't a marriage. He fell in love with her. He wanted to be with her. It was a mistress, yeah. So a mistress. It was a mistress. Very good.
Why is the word that you got?
Frank the Gemara, Mama, you're bang on. So how could you use the Lashon Vayischatin if it was just a mistress? So the Gemara, Mitoich Ahava Yisera, She'ava, since he loved her so much, Malo of Akosov Keilu Nischatin. The Torah considered it, the Navi describes it as if it was a marriage. So let's just do a inventory of where we're holding. I'm sorry? So Shlomo is not relevant, right? So that means we can go back and we can say that Lois Eschate Bam is referring to a Giyoris, right? What do we have her? Don't we have her? Amar of Alav Milti, the Giyusim last. So basically, you have to say that the mitzvah was of Lois Eschate Bam is when they became Giyoris already, and therefore, if a Nisin could marry, if a Yisrael Tzedakah could marry a Nisin, the Kedusha drops. So therefore, by a Kain also, the Kedusha drops. If he's a Tzedakah, he can marry a Giyar. I think that's a boom. Yeah, because there's Zakta Gemara about it. So that's where we're at. Amalei Ravina Ravashi. I have a different riot to your Shaila. And here the Bach says the Ha Tanan, the Anan Loy Tanan Hach. We didn't learn like this because we learned as follows: Psua Daka uChrushavcha Davka. Who could a Psua Daka and Khrushchevka marry? Davka Mutarim Begiyaris Umishachweres. But you know what's gapingly missing from this list? A Nisin. Habenisina Asiri. So this bride seems to indicate, not like the bride you quoted in the Nomad Aleph, this indicates that a Yisrael, a Khrushchevka, cannot marry Nisin. Amar Lei, so Rav Ashi answered back, you can't bring me a rye from this brisa, because this brisa is contradictory mineubei. Look at the seif of the brisa. The Ein and the only people that Khrushchevka cannot marry is Elalavi Bekal. So there I have the opposite. You can't bring any raya from here. So we're remaining with the halacha that the kedusha of Tzedakah drops off. So if he's a Yisrael, he can marry the sin. If he's a Kayin, he can marry a Giyaris and a Mishacharis. Beautiful. Now we're going to get up to the Rus Gemara. I jumped a little bit ahead of myself before. Amani umayavi asurim, the isurin Yisraelim. The males from Amay and Moav are also forever. Aval nekeva yisehem mutarois miyad. Women from the nation of Ammon and Moav are allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael, such as Rus. Mitzri v'adoimi, their einam asurim elat shloisha doyers. Their Isser is only 3 generations, but their Isser applies echad zcharim bechad nekevas. Rabbi Shimon says matters in the Nekevos miyad. The Nekevos are mutter across the board by everybody, and there's a charim by Amoinim and Anab are also forever, Mitzrim are in the Daimim for 3 generations. Rabbi Shimon, Kavachimer Advar. You can make a Kavachimer. Ma b'mokim she'asher zcharim Yisraelim. Ma dech Amoinim Amayovim. Where the Isser is very, very chomer. We never let the men marry to Klal Yisrael. Nevertheless, hit the rest of the Nekevos miyad. The Nekevos are not included in the Isser. So Mitri Nadaimi, Mokim Shali Asher Zacharim, Elach Shloisha Dairis. Mitri, which clearly is not nearly as bad as Ammon Moav, because we let them into Klal Yisrael at the 3rd generation. Einoi Din, Shinatis and Nekevos miyad. Surely the Nekevos should be able to marry into Klal Yisrael right away. Amr Loi, they responded to him, Im Halacha Nekaba. If you have a Kabbalah, Ish Mipiyish, Halacha L'Moshe Messinai, I'll accept that from you. But V'rim Ladin, if you just have your logical argument, yes, tshuva. I can show you that your logic is faulty, and the Gemara is going to tell us what that is. Amr Lahem, Loiki Halacha Niyomer. That's Halacha. It's Halacha Moshe Messinai, or I don't know if Halacha Messinai. It's Ish Mipiyish. I know for sure this is my Kabbalah, but this is the law. Zoktimar Minoah Hanamili. How do we know that an Amoini Samayavus is allowed to marry? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the Amar Kra. There was a very dramatic event. Goliath was standing there taunting Klal Yisrael, and everybody was quaking in their boots. And Shaul HaMelech said, "Whoever is going to take down Goliath, I'm going to give him my daughter." And all of a sudden, this little pipsqueak, little David HaMelech, a short little redhead, comes squeaking out of the crowd, and he says, "I got him! I got it! I got it!" I used to be in Camp Aguda, and a pop fly was coming to me. The best sound I was able to hear was, "I got it," because then I could run away and I'd have to fumble it. Because if it's coming to me, if they say, Simon, it's for you, I know we're done. I knew we were done, right? And my mazel, I brought mazel. They didn't put me in the outfield. They put me like 10 miles past the outfield. And I brought such good luck to the other team that whenever I was 10 miles past the outfield, the guy hit it there. I don't know whose team I was on. It was unbelievable. So Dr. Gemara, we're not on the milli. Amar Berechem Damar Kra. Ucheroi Shaul es David Yoytzil Lekras HaPlishti. Amar al Avner Sar Ltova. Shaul turned to his general and he said, Ben mi zeh hanar. Who is this child? Avner, my general Avner, who is this boy? Avner says, Chai nafshecha hamelech midati. I swear I don't have a clue who this guy is. Freit Gemara below Yodalei. How is it possible that Shaul and Avner didn't recognize David HaMelech? But see, by Yavei Moed, it said Shaul loved David HaMelech. But he like nice to Caleb, and he actually was the shamus of the king. So he knew him. So what is he asking who he was? Hello. So I just want to bring your attention to this word. When he asked who David was, he said, Miza Hanar. He referred to David as a nar. We're going to see later David is referred to as something else. But he didn't know Caleb. He didn't want to know who David was. He wanted to know who his father was. Are you saying that Shaul HaMelech didn't know Yishai? This is talking about Yishai, who was old among the people. This was Yishai Abi David. He was a big officer in the army of Shaul. He led a battalion of 600,000 soldiers. Any battalion that's led of 600,000 soldiers, there's no doubt that the king and the general would know him by name. Dr. Gemara, so what was Shaul's question? Shaul wanted to know what's the yichus of this person? Imi Peretz Asi, does this child come from Peretz? And now I know he's going to be Malchus for David, so now he's a threat to my Malchus. Imi Zerach Asi, or if he's just from Zerach and he's not a threat to my Malchus. Imi Peretz Asi, well then Malkahavi. Now I got a big problem. I'm not looking for competition. I'm looking for assistance. Shamelech Peretz Lasois Derech. A melech, if he needs a shortcut to a property that he owns, and you have a property in between, he can mow your house down. He can do whatever he wants. And no one can stop him. But he's a chashiv a mensch, but I don't have to feel that my malchus is threatened. Zvok to Gemara, why was Shaul suddenly paranoid that his malchus was threatened? My time in Amarlei, Shalalei. Why did suddenly Shaul get uncomfortable and feel that his malchus was threatened. The Chsivit says, but David was a small little redhead guy. Shaul was a big guy. We're going to soon see in a second. His shoulders was above everybody else. He was a big, good-looking man. Shaul. But Yilba Shaul is David Madav Kimidosa. They took the scales. What is it called? The armor. They took Shaul's armor. Shaul gave his armor to David, and it shrunk to fit David HaMelech perfectly. It was mamish a nes nigla right in front of him. It happens to my shirt almost every Shabbos, right? The nes nigla. It says, "Baby Shaul mishichmai umayla gavoy mikalam." So it was clear that the armor shrunk. So now Shaul HaMelech says, "Oh, this guy is potentially a threat to my kingdom. Who is this guy?" Amalei Doig would love to cut people down, and he said, "Vils Visnoy is a Koenig, Frego is a Yi. Acha at the Mashal, all of him Haganu the Malchus. Don't ask if he's a Shishi. Ask if we can even give him Chamishi, right? Before you ask if he's Roy Malchus, maybe ask Sholov him Roy Love the Kalam. Who knows if he can even marry a Jew? My time with the Ka'asim Arusa Moivia." Amalei Abner said, "Doig, you might be a Talmid Chacham, but you're wrong this time. Tanina, we learned Amoyni v'loy Amoynis, Moyavi v'loy Me'avis." So Doig said, "Really? Do a pshat? Let me the Chabas fragen about it. Elamayata, Mamazer v'loy Mamzeres. You think because the Torah expresses it in a lashon of Zohar, that means automatically to exclude in the Keva? So you're going to say Mamazer v'loy Mamzeres? Are you going to say that a Mamzeres is allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael?" So Abner says, "Nah, Doig, this is going to get the kasha. Mamzer ksiv, which means a mumzor. He's created from foreign parts, so that's not a lashon zocher. It's talking about an assembly built of bad parts, which applies equally to male or female." So Doig said, "What about mitri v'loy mitris?" So the Gemara, shiny hacha the mafarish time of the crop. Abner says, "You know why it's amoni v'loy amonis, v'loy mavis? Because there's a reason why the women shouldn't be included in the prohibition to marry them, because it says, why may you not marry them? Al asher kitmu eschem belechem uvamai. They didn't come out, and this is the makar of akar shatoy b'chol Torah kula. Why did Ammon and Moav even come into existence? Only because Avraham Avinu saved their lives by Shadayim. They wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Avraham Avinu. So you would think they would owe us akar shatoy, and when we were in trouble, they would come help us. But no. They didn't bring us lechem in mind. So who would normally run out to the, sometimes you hear I get stuck in the airport for Shabbos. Who runs to the airport to bring them food? Right? Which Lubavitchers? The Izzy Miller, right? Izzy Miller, the male, not Mrs. Izzy Miller. Darko shal ish lakadeh. Below darko shal ish lakadeh. So Doig says, "No, ich bin asat merchusit. Was redste? In tat mir nicht so. Hoye lahem lakadeh anoshim lakras anoshim. V'noshim lakras noshim." The men, the guys should bring food to the women. The Satman of Abner about Maros Kagam. So Abner was speechless. He didn't have an answer. Miyad v'yomer Melech shal ato ben Miza. I need to know ben Miza ha'elam. Who is this child? Frank Gemara hasn't correlate nar. A minute ago, Shaul asked, "Who is this nar?" Hachik correlate elam. Now we call him elam. Why did the word change to describe David HaMelech? Hachik Omar, like this is what David HaMelech meant. Halacha is alma mimcha. Clearly, you forgot this halacha. We don't know if a female moyavis is allowed to marry Klal Yisrael. Say v'shal b'besmedrash. Go ask in the besmedrash what halacha is. Shaul, they asked. Amrullah, they told him, "Amoyni v'loy amoynis, me'ovi v'loy me'ovis." We'll stop here, but now Doeg starts arguing with the people in the besmedrash, and he asked them all these questions, and we'll see the maskana tomorrow. Because tomorrow we're going to learn, even though it's a holiday, we're going to learn first year at 6, the second year at 9. I won't be here in person, but if anybody knows how to turn this television on, I could be here on television. I'll feel like Y.Y. Jacobson. So everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yossi, I thought you were going to, when you talked about impotent, you're going to say that famous joke about impotent.
Were you on last night? Oh, you weren't on last night.
No.
I said it on last night, and I was met with complete silence. And some of them didn't think it was funny, and some people didn't think it was appropriate.
No, because people were muted. That's why you didn't hear laughter.
Oh, okay. Geweldig.
Shkoyach,
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yossi,
Yes,
you have a little time?
of course.